Well, good afternoon. If it's Monday, 3 o'clock, it's Mondays with Michael live here on Facebook. Hoping everyone had a great weekend. So if you're with me last week, you know that we're going to do a three-part series on hiring decisions. And why a three-part series? Well, we're going to take a look at different parts of the hiring process when it comes to the assessment we use. So we're going to take a look at thinking style today, a little bit about what that measures. And then we're going to do behavioral traits next week. And then the third week, we're going to do about what a candidate's interest may be, and then how to use our hiring report to make a good hiring decision. So as always, I'm going to go to my notes and share some data with you. So we tell clients, or we suggest to clients, that when they're hiring some folks, there are three parts of the hiring decision. There's the background of the individual, education, skills, that kind of thing. So the whole background of the candidate that usually you see on the resume. There's the face-to-face interview, which either happens one time or several times in organizations, sometimes through recruiting and then with the managers, and sometimes they're done in groups, but there's that face-to-face interaction with the potential candidate. And for our clients, a lot of them, the third part of that decision process is using an assessment. Assessment, it tells you what's kind of under the surface, or what I like to say is what's between the ears, and how the person behaves at the workplace. The assessment we use is the PXT Select. The product's been on the market for a while. It was the old Profile XT. Our partners at Wiley revalidated the assessment a couple years ago, and it's the PXT Select. You can see some information about that on our website. We're going to talk a little about that today, and over the next couple sessions, talk about how the assessment's used and how things get measured. And as always, there's a phone call coming in the office, which does happen from time to time as you're sitting here at your desk on a Tuesday. And there it goes. Someone upstairs picked up the phone. So when you're using an assessment to use in the pre-employment process, a couple things. One, you have to make sure the assessment's valid to use in the pre-employment area. So that's very, very important. The other thing is, how are you using the assessment? Our assessment is used by comparing a candidate score to a performance model. So our folks at Wiley have done a lot of research around jobs and competency and skill and behaviors, and have come up with over 100 performance models of different jobs within the organization. So what our clients do is they tend to select one of those performance models to compare their potential candidates to, and they're broken down by job class and by management and by leaders and whatnot in different parts of the business. There's HR models, there's finance models, there's operation models. So you pick a performance model based on the job, and you can tweak it a little bit, but most folks tend to use the full performance model. So then potential employees take the assessment. Now the assessment's taken online. The PXT Select's taken online. It takes about an hour to take. And it's a real rich assessment. It's very well designed, very well crafted, fairly intuitive when it comes to participants completing the assessment. They can take it for a while, stop, take a breath, go back in and finish it up if you need them to. So once the assessment's completed, what you're going to do as the owner of the assessment is you're going to compare the candidate's results to this performance model benchmark, if you will, comparing the individual to what the job requires. So over the next couple of sessions, we're going to take a look at what the job requires and what the assessment actually measures. And the first part of that assessment measures thinking style. So again, I'm going to go to my notes, and I'm going to use this quick reference guide, which is available on our website. There you go. And gives you all the information, or at least the basics of the information of what gets measured on the site. But just at a high level, the thinking style, this portion of the assessment, measures cognitive ability, or how a person processes and communicates information. Very important. Assessment questions test the candidate's base knowledge of vocabulary and mathematical concepts, as well as the application and knowledge in the workplace. Now, wouldn't it be great to know that type of information from a potential candidate working at your organization? So there are several scales. There are 4 specific scales I'm going to go over with you that get measured in this thinking style area. But the first is the composite score, which is an overall score of the individual. Now, the score comes in on a Sten graph from 1 to 10. 1 to 3 being best at using most straightforward concepts on the job in this area, and then 8 to 10 benefits or most development opportunities. So depending on where they fall on the scale, there's strength or not as strong in this particular area. And that's okay, because you're trying to fit the requirements of the job. And the requirement of the job you're trying to fill may be on one side of the scale or the other. So the first thing we take a look at is verbal skill, a measure of vocabulary. The scale provides a sense of suitability and effectiveness of words a person might choose to communicate with others. Again, very important part of the job. Depending where the candidates fall, you can see where they fall in on one scale, one side of the scale or the other. But then there's verbal reasoning, using words for reasoning and problem solving. Verbal reasoning includes an active component. How does someone use words to create relationships between concepts, but also addresses how someone receives information and how well they process message from others? Again, wouldn't that be good information for you to have before you hire somebody? And again, the participant scores will fall in along the scale, and you'll see where they compare to the model. And then the other two scales in this particular area of thinking is numeric ability. The first is numeric ability, a measure of numerical calculation ability. So again, the scale measures whether a person knows how to use various numeric calculations, and they will do this during the assessment process. Think about those times in high school when you're solving for X and Y, and part of that is part of the assessment, and you'll see where they fall on that scale. And then next is numeric reasoning, using numbers as a basis in reasoning and problem solving. How well do folks use numbers in problem solving? Again, depending on the job, this may be very, very important, or depending on the job, may not be important as much. The numeric reasoning scale measures how well a person can apply his or her understanding of numbers and calculations to solve problems. And again, depending on what industry you're in, like we do a lot of work in the high-tech industry where engineers need to have high numbers in those numeric categories, and that's fine. But depending on the job you're trying to fill, you know, those number categories may not need to be as strong as other categories on the communication side. So it's something that you have to take a look at. So that's the first part of the assessment process. Now, when we have participants take the assessment, we'll talk more about this as we go along. Those results will come out in this comprehensive selection report, which is also on our assessment. You'll see, compared to the individual and the benchmark, and you'll see this on our Facebook page, where they fit into that thinking style. You'll see this here, the overall fit, and then the thinking style fit. You'll see where that individual fits versus where the requirements of the job are. So it's very, very important that you have this solid performance model before you get started. So once you get past that, the next set of scales, which we're going to talk about in our next session, is all about behavior. And there are 9 scales in the behavior area. And I hear this regularly from clients. And, you know, Michael, this person seemed to have the right, you know, competencies. They had the right skills on the top side of the assessment, but their behavior scales were way off the chart. They just really didn't fit into the culture, into our organization. And that's what the behavior scales really measure. How do they fit into the culture of the organization? And it's very, very important that you get to know this information up front rather than waiting, you know, 60 days down the line. You figure out that this person was great on paper, but when this person actually came to work on a Tuesday morning or a Monday morning, they just didn't fit in. So we encourage our clients to use this assessment tool as 1/3 of the decision-making process. You don't want to rely totally on the assessment because you do want to do the face-to-face interview. And you also want to take a look at their resume as far as education and whatnot. But we have a lot of clients that put the assessment up front, that they tell me, Michael, if this particular candidate doesn't fit, especially in the behavior side, to our culture, I mean, they could have the best thinking scores up on the top of the run here. But you know, if they don't fit behavior-wise, they're just not going to be a good fit in our organization. So we'll bypass the interview and we'll go on to the next candidate. So in our next 2 sessions, we'll review the behavior, the 9 scales of behavior, and then we'll take a look at the interest scales, which are the 3rd part of the assessment. And then we're also going to review what the actual interview report gives to you as a potential hiring manager. It gives you a lot of great information and gives you some questions you can go back and answer, but that's for a later time. I am going to put a link into the chat here or the message here as far as the video that we have on our website that describes the assessment. And we are going to do a webinar, a deeper dive on this assessment in January. I'll also put that link on there for you. So our session next week will be on the 9 behavioral scales. So come back and join me. Mondays with Michael live here on Facebook. If you're watching this post session, thanks for checking in. We'll see you next week. Have a great week. Bye.